All right, how about now? Okay. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Looks like there was one little setting that was not turned on. So I'm sure the sound will be working now. Let me know. There is a little bit of a delay sometimes, so it is going to come through. Cabot says it's better. I can see some of you commenting saying that it's all good right now. Yeah, silly me. I forgot to turn it on. Now, we've got a few interesting topics to talk about on today's show, so I'm glad that everyone is on board. Now, first of all, there's something that I just wanted to clear the air on. That's right. Now, on the last episode of MCJ Report, we spoke about the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and we spoke about the methodology involved in attributing COVID-19 deaths to COVID-19, essentially. And it looks like I may have actually made a mistake, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. I referred to Brett Sutton and Trevor Sutton as brothers. Now, one of my supporters got in touch with me, and I looked into it further. And although I found this information on multiple pages on the website, and one of the sources being one that is, I know, read probably by a lot of you, I'm not going to say the name of the source, I actually came to the realization that this information could not be independently verified. Now, it's very important to me that the information I relay on the show is accurate at all times. I want to do the right thing by you guys. So in good conscience, I need to let you know that I was not able to independently verify any type of family link. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to let you know because at the end of the day, it's really important for me to keep this show in good standing in terms of integrity. Okay, in addition to that, I was not actually able to verify that this person in question, Trevor Sutton, is the current Deputy Australian Statistician. Former, definitely, but it looks like there is a new person now. So, yeah, once again, I just wanted to clear the air on that and let you know that I will always endeavor to do my best to independently verify anything. So this is a little reminder that we need to be as diligent as we possibly can. And I'd like to thank you all for your understanding and let you know that I'll always endeavor to get everything right. And you know what? If I do get something wrong from time to time, I'll come straight out and I will tell you. All right, so if we're not going to be like the news that makes mistakes and then never owns up to it. If there is a mistake, I'll let you know. So I hope that's okay with you guys. I just wanted to get that out of the way, and I'm going to redo a segment on the ABS and how they attribute deaths to COVID, and we're going to do a whole new presentation on it. So this is sort of motivated me to bring my game up to even a new level. So yeah, thanks a lot, and I wanted to let you know that. Anyway, let's get to the news. All right, so I'm sure a lot of you saw that this character right here, Greg Hunt, is in hospital. He's reported to have some type of infection. Now, of course, we know that this came shortly after Greg Hunt took the vaccine. The media is reporting that supposedly the hospitalization has nothing to do with the vaccine and that it's some other type of infection. So a lot of people, of course, thought, well, he's gotten the vaccine, now he's off the hospital. But of course, you know, we can't put one and one together like that. But I'm going to play a little clip to you right here from 9 News.
As we come back to you, we have breaking news. Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt is in hospital tonight with a suspected infection. He's been given antibiotics and fluids and will remain there overnight. His staff say he's expected to make a full recovery and clarifying his condition is not related to the COVID.
Okay, so that cut off a little bit early there, but yeah. So as you could see there, of course, Greg Hunt in hospital. 9 News making it abundantly clear that it's not related to the COVID-19 vaccine. But of course, we see all around the world media reports when somebody is hospitalized or something else happens, like they die after taking the COVID-19 vaccine. The media is very quick to say, hey, there's no link here. They're not connected. Nothing to see. Keep on moving. So what do you think? Put that in the comments. Do you have a suspicion that the media is not being honest with you regarding the hospitalization of Greg Hunt? I don't know. I wasn't in the room. I don't know what happened. Put that in the comments and let me know what you think. Do you think we can trust the media? I don't know. All right. And of course, there's this guy right here, Daniel Andrews. It's common news by now that supposedly Daniel Andrews had some type of accident with a staircase which resulted in multiple broken ribs and an injury to his back. Now, there's been a couple of conflicting pieces of information on the media. I read on one hand this supposedly happened in his home, and then I read that it supposedly happened in a holiday home in Mornington. So which one was it? Both have been reported. I'm not sure which scenario is true. So, of course, once again, I wasn't there at the time. I don't know what happened to Daniel Andrews. I don't know why the stairs were wet. Why would the stairs be wet? It seems like a pretty silly thing to do. Or maybe it was something else. Once again, I don't really have much faith in the mainstream media. We've seen 9 News and how they covered even our events, right? We saw a reporter on 9 News after we protested out the front of Greg Hunt's office, who reported that the only restrictions people would have who choose not to take the COVID-19 vaccine would be in relation to international travel. Really? Really? I mean, we see in New South Wales right now, ScoMo dealing with the Premier and working to roll out some type of COVID pass similar to Israel to grant access to vaccinated people, COVID-19 vaccinated people into places like clubs, bars and restaurants. So 9 News got that terribly wrong. Maybe they've gotten this wrong as well. So there's one thing that I want to make perfectly clear, and that is that Daniel Andrews is obviously going through a hard time right now. But what he's going through is nothing compared to the suffering that he has inflicted upon millions of Victorians. Okay, we've seen a man since the start of his tenure as Premier has betrayed the people time and time again by running off to China with our money on our dime, dealing in these secretive meetings with the Chinese Communist Party and signing up to deals such as the Belt and Road Initiative that had national security implications. So he's run wild since the start of his tenure. Since the inception of COVID, he seized opportunity to assume the ultimate unilateral control over Victoria. We've seen Parliament debate shut down. We've had inhumane restrictions placed upon us, countless amounts of jobs and businesses lost that will never come back, and a mental health crisis that will haunt us for many, many years to come. So he's got some broken ribs. He's supposedly in hospital right now. He wants everyone to feel sorry for him. But maybe Daniel Andrews should use this time to think about the damage and destruction that he has inflicted upon Victorians. Maybe you think I sound a little bit cold, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to be like the leader of the opposition, Michael O'Brien, who sent a tweet, "Hey, I hope it's okay. I hope that you're not too hurt," etc. Michael O'Brien has basically been hiding in the corner this whole time. He has not come out swinging during the inception of this crisis. He has not come out batting for the Victorians who have had their lives destroyed by Daniel Andrews. So I just wanted to say that real quick and put that in the comments. Do you think that Daniel Andrews got into an altercation with a staircase, or do you think it was something else? There's one report that says he fell on stairs, and there's another that says he fell down the stairs. So we're getting conflicting information. Was it at a holiday home in Mornington, or was it at his home? Did he fall on the stairs, or did he fall down the stairs? Falling on the stairs kind of implies like you're falling forward, which I would not imagine would result in broken ribs and an injured back and so forth. Falling down the stairs, however, I mean, that's going to ruin your day, 100%. So put that in the comments. I don't really know what to think about it. There's been conflicting information. Hopefully he uses this time to think about the suffering that he has inflicted upon other people. Is that fair enough? All right, so there's a little report here from 9 News. I'm going to play this right now. You can hear what they're saying.
The Premier may need to undergo spinal surgery after fracturing his back and ribs while falling over. Mark Santomartino joins me now. Mark, a decision is likely this afternoon.
It's what the Premier's medical team is discussing right now, Brett. Clearly his injuries are much more severe than first thought. Daniel Andrews was brought to the Alfred as a precaution last night, but 9 News understands that his damaged spine is in fact fractured. The Premier has cracked his T7 vertebrae. That's the bone about halfway down the back of your spine, which the Premier hurt slipping down some wet steps. He's also broken ribs on either side of that. Brett, his wife Kath left home this morning to be by his side. We know Daniel Andrews fell at a rented holiday home on the Mornington Peninsula. A seemingly innocuous fall, but it caused an injury that surgeon John Cunningham sees every day.
These fractures can be really common and often caused by fairly minor trauma, but the pain from them can persist for quite some time. Fortunately, they don't all end up in paraplegia.
I know he's in good spirits. Kath and the kids are absolutely feeling well supported and are very thankful, and the Premier is very thankful for all of the medical attention that he's in receipt of, and he is in the very best of hands.
The Premier hasn't yet responded to the Prime Minister's well wishes over text. Colleagues are throwing their weight behind Dan's deputy now. James Merlino joked that the Premier should be back at Parliament by Tuesday. Brett, surgery or not, that is now seeming very unlikely. He'll likely be out of the political game for weeks to come. We are hoping for an official update before the 6 o'clock news.
All right, so there you go. That was the report. That reported from a holiday home. So if the 9 News report is accurate, then we can see that it actually looks quite serious and he may be out of action for a while. I saw one of you made a joke in the comments saying maybe he let
Good
down the
afternoon.
Chinese
First
Communist
to what
Party.
is very much...
Well, I tell you what, the Chinese Communist Party, they're probably not entirely happy with Daniel Andrews right now. Daniel Andrews thought that he could get the Belt and Road Initiative through. Eventually, Scott Morrison stepped in and he introduced the Foreign Relations Bill and is now supposedly working to completely undo all of the work with the Belt and Road Initiative that Daniel Andrews engaged in with the Chinese Communist Party. We're yet to really see the effects of that, though. So, you know, maybe the powers to be, as in Daniel Andrews' powers to be at the Chinese Communist Party, maybe they're not happy with him. I mean, you know, they thought that they were going to attain this very lucrative backdoor access into the Australian economy via Victoria. That looks like it's not happening anymore. But there's actually another massive deal which China just ratified, which I'm going to talk about later on in the show, which could potentially be worse than the Belt and Road Initiative, and this is from the federal government, but I'm going to talk to you about it later. There's still details emerging from it, and I'm going to be covering it a lot more closely. But anyway, I'm going to get moving on with other news now. So here we go. More bad news for a Premier, this time in Western Australia. Mark McGowan's electoral office evacuated after package thrown into building. All right, I'm going to play this little report for you as well.
To those stories in a moment, but first to some breaking news. There's been an attack on Premier Mark McGowan's electoral office in Rockingham. Let's go live to El Giorgio in the newsroom. El, what do we know?
Sam, good afternoon. The details on this one are still coming to hand, but what we believe at this stage is that a suspicious item, believed to be a package, has been thrown into the office of Mark McGowan, as you say, at his electoral office in Rockingham this afternoon. We're going to take you live to some chopper shots that are coming into the newsroom right now. As you can see, hazmat teams are there on the ground right now. It is still early days, but as I say, we understand that a suspicious parcel has been thrown into the office. Ambulances have been called to the scene as well to treat a staff member, we understand, who was complaining of a sore throat. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services have also been called to the scene and streets have been blocked off. This is very much a developing situation, a developing story, and we will bring you more details as they come to hand this afternoon and tonight in the news at 6. Sam?
Yeah, so as you can see, there's people over in Western Australia who maybe they're not so happy with Mark McGowan, and we're seeing these types of things happening over and over again. We saw some things going on at Daniel Andrews' office. Now we see Mark McGowan's office. So I'm sure that it will be investigated, and I guess we'll have to just sort of wait and see what happens. Anyway, moving forward, I wanted to show you a little propaganda piece here published by, no, not the Chinese Communist Party, published by South Australia Health. This is in regards to getting the vaccine, and you can see that they're very crafty how they make these videos. They're trying not to make therapeutic claims, instead using other visuals to try and compel people into getting the vaccine. We did a whole piece the other day on the psychological tactics clinical trial that's currently being undertaken by the Yale University, which is testing various tactics for the purpose of coercing people into getting the COVID-19. Tactics such as using the notion of fear, bravery, embarrassment, like responsibility, do it for your country, don't be a coward, that type of thing. Don't be selfish, you know, you don't want to be that person who kills grandma, for instance. And now we see here, of course, South Australia Health rolling out propaganda that seems to be based on these psychological methods. Here it says right here, roll up to protect the ones you love. Okay, so obviously implying get the vaccine and you will protect your loved ones. Don't be that person that kills grandma. I'm going to play this for you right now.
I'm going to roll up to protect the ones I love.
I'm going to roll up to keep businesses open.
I'll be rolling up to keep celebrating with family and friends.
We're going to roll up so we can travel again.
With the arrival of vaccines proven safe and effective around the world,
We can all play our part in protecting ourselves, our loved ones and SA. Roll up when it's your turn to get vaccinated against COVID-19.
Yeah, so there you go. More propaganda implying that if you take the vaccine, you will be protecting your loved ones. Of course, they're not providing any proof beyond reasonable doubt. What we do know beyond reasonable doubt is that the clinical trials will only conclude for the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccine in 2023. That is something that we absolutely know beyond a reasonable doubt. We also know these vaccines have only been provisionally approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, meaning they're still looking for issues. That's right. The Therapeutic Goods Administration has made no bones about it. They've essentially said that should there be some type of series of adverse events, they won't hesitate to step in and take action. We saw in Austria that the AstraZeneca vaccine has been suspended. Okay, so yeah, once again, I'm just asking you to read between the lines and to not necessarily buy into whatever the government is putting out there. Okay, now just moving on here, moving on to Hong Kong. All right, so this is coming from Apple Daily. This is a Hong Kong news publication. Editorial, a breach in medical. Hong Kong has fallen. This is coming from Apple Daily in Hong Kong. There, right there, that's the leader of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam. She's a Hong Konger, but completely bought and paid for by the Chinese Communist Party. Does that sound like anyone you know? Carrie Lam essentially has facilitated the downfall of Hong Kong, has stood by while her native nation, you could once actually refer to Hong Kong as a nation, fell under the iron fist rule of the Chinese Communist Party. Freedom has all but been destroyed in Hong Kong. Okay, after passing the national security law, people can't congregate, people can't protest. That's right. Speak out against the Chinese Communist Party or speak up in favor of a free Hong Kong. You'll be charged under the national security law and you could be looking at a lifetime in prison. That's right. Speak up for independence, whether it's online or at a protest, and you could be spending the rest of your life in prison if you happen to be a Hong Kong person. This national security law in Hong Kong is far-reaching as well. The Chinese Communist Party is actually attempting to apply this law to people all around the world. So in other words, somebody like me who I openly support Hong Kong, I love Hong Kong. I should say I love what Hong Kong used to be. If I was to travel back to Hong Kong, which I don't see that ever happening really, I could be charged under this national security law, put on trial and sentenced. So I don't think I'll be going back to Hong Kong. Anyway, I'm just going to read this article for you guys. Daz says the CCP will go down one day. They got bloody close in 1989. Who here knows the great story about the Tiananmen Square democratic protesters? You know, they had so much momentum. They had so much momentum. If only the military joined the people on that day in 1989, China could very well be a democratic nation. They could have overthrown the Chinese Communist Party. It's sad that history didn't go that way. And I don't want to get too much off on a tangent, but after 1989, when the Chinese Communist Party killed an estimated 10,000 unarmed protesters, instead of sanctioning China and sending them backwards, what did we do in the West? We through Bill Clinton, we brought them into the World Trade Organization. America moved all of their manufacturing to China, massively boosting the Chinese economy, for which they needed resources. The two most important resources, two of the most important, you can argue, iron ore and coal, to which we in Australia happily supplied them with. And we reaped huge profits, huge returns of selling these resources to China. And now we have created the greatest enemy of our lifetime. We see the persecution of minority groups in China. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But I just want you to remember that all of China's military expansion, whether it's islands in the South China Sea, or their belligerence around Japanese sovereign waters, or Taiwan, or the establishment of military bases in Africa, this is all done so with Australian steel, okay? It's Australian steel is used to expand the Chinese military, jets, weapons, bullets. It's used to build concentration camps in the far west region of East Turkestan. And this is something that nobody wants to talk about, certainly the people that work within the walls of our parliaments. But we need to talk about it, because unless we act, I can guarantee you that Australia is going to pay a massive spiritual price for assisting the rise in what can only be described as an evil regime. And I argue that we're already paying that price. Anyway, I don't want to get on too much of a tangent here, so I'm just going to keep this rolling. So Hong Kong. I'm going to read to you. 1, 2, then 3. 3 have died consecutively after receiving the Sinovac vaccine. That's the Chinese-developed COVID-19 vaccine. As soon as the news was reported, the percentage of people who had scheduled appointments for vaccination had dropped from 90% to 72%. Makes sense, right? People start dying and all of a sudden the population, they're not so keen, they're not so enthusiastic to get vaccinated. At this rate, people are only going to be more reluctant. Patrick Nip, who is in charge of this, claimed that the deaths were unrelated to the vaccine and experts are awaiting autopsy reports. Okay, well, of course, whenever somebody dies shortly after taking one of these COVID-19 vaccines, it's never due to the vaccine, it's always other issues. When somebody dies, it's reported to be from COVID. End of story, no more questions. Take this vaccine, stick it in your arm, shut up, and get on with your day. All right, so that's happening in Hong Kong right now. Moving on to Germany, a lot of you know this lawyer here, Rainer Fulmich. He's been one of the global leaders actually fighting back against the restrictions, the censorship of doctors online, and looking to lead the legal charge against some of the world's pharmaceutical companies who are at the forefront of this COVID situation. I'm going to read to you here. This is coming from IsraelNationalNews.com. Lawyers to sue World Health Organization for, quote, misleading world over COVID-19 outbreak. Consumer protection trial lawyer Rainer Fulmich says agencies knowingly misled governments across the world. Now, Rainer Fulmich is no ordinary lawyer. He's been successful against Deutsche Bank and also Volkswagen. It says here, the move was announced by Dr. Rainer Fulmich. This is coming from late last month, by the way, but of course Rainer's been working on this for a long time now. The move was announced by Rainer Fulmich, one of 4 members of the German Coronavirus Investigative Committee that has been hearing international scientists and experts' testimonies since July 10th, 2020. In a video released to his YouTube channel, Fulmich accuses World Health Organization Director Tedros Adhanom and Dr. Christian Drosten, the head of virology at Berlin's Charité Hospital, and Dr. Lothar Wheeler, head of the RKI, the German counterpart of the US Center for Disease Control, whom he claims knowingly misled governments around the world. Here's a quote from Rainer Fulmich. This corona crisis, according to all we know today, must be renamed a corona scandal, and those responsible for it must be criminally prosecuted and sued for civil damages. Who here likes the sound of that? Put that in the comments. He said, on a political level, everything must be done to make sure that no one will ever again be in a position of such power to be able to defraud humanity or to attempt to manipulate us with their corrupt agendas. Wouldn't it be nice if wouldn't it be nice if people such as Daniel Andrews could never be put in such a position of power? You think about the unilateral power from Daniel Andrews and the way in which he's assumed ultimate control over Victoria. We've seen it all. We've seen Parliament and debate shut down, protesters squashed, people placed under house arrest, accused of being sick, no presumption of innocence, no presumption of not being sick, no explanation on whether honest is for diagnosing in patients SARS-CoV-2 or determining how potentially infectious someone might be. We know what's best. I'm a massive fan of Dr. Rainer Fulmich, and I really support what he's doing, and I think you should support it as well. Okay, I'm going to read to you one more quote from him before we move on. Fulmich plans on filing a class action lawsuit in the United States. 1, is there a pandemic or is there only a PCR test pandemic? And it goes on. I'll post this in my Telegram, but of course you should support this man. He's very brave and he's really doing a lot. He's doing a lot to fight against this entire situation. All right, moving on to the New York Times. China is using Uyghur labor to produce face masks. Now, this is a story from last year. Who here remembers this story? So just a little bit of a background. The Uyghur Muslim minority in China live in the far western region of East Turkestan. They've been suppressed greatly by the Chinese Communist Party. They've been forced into what the Chinese Communist Party refers to as re-education camps that have later been verified as concentration camps. There's a systemic campaign against the Uyghurs. We see crimes against humanity being carried out against them, such as forced biometric data harvesting and DNA surveillance, forced sterilization of women, which is a form of ethnic cleansing, genocide, torture, and even murder. And a lot of it's taking place in these concentration camps that have been proven to exist beyond reasonable doubt via whistleblowers, leaked footage, leaked photos, and satellite footage. So we know that this is going on. Now, this story came out last year about the face masks being manufactured in these regions over in East Turkestan, where, of course, the home to the Uyghur Muslims that are being persecuted. So I'm just going to remind you a little bit about it. This was actually from August 13th last year, and you'll see why I'm revisiting it in the next article. Okay, it says here, it looks like we're having some issues with the broadcast, but I'm just going to keep going because I'm going to re-upload it later. As the coronavirus pandemic continues to drive demand for personal protective equipment, Chinese companies are rushing to manufacture the gear for domestic and global consumption. A New York Times visual investigation has found that some of these companies are using Uyghur labor through a government-sponsored program that experts say often puts people to work against their will. All right, so we're talking about forced labor. The companies produce equipment primarily for domestic use, but the Times identified several other companies outside of Xinjiang, which I refer to as East Turkestan, that make use of legal Uyghur labor and export globally. It says here, Uyghurs have long been persecuted by the Chinese government, which says its tight control over Xinjiang is necessary to fight what it calls religious extremism. In a response to the Times, a spokesman for China's embassy in US said the program, quote, helps local residents rise above poverty through employment and to lead fulfilling lives. Okay, so so China often uses these types of statements. Hey, we're just providing jobs. We're just providing these people with a better life. But then the investigations always show abuse against workers. We see horrendous conditions, 17, 18-hour work days, 7 days a week. Just people being treated very, very badly and given no choice. We're talking about forced labor. And when it comes to prisoners of conscience in China, as in people who have different thoughts as opposed to the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's the Uyghur Muslims or whether it's the Falun Gong practitioners, we see people sentenced to jail terms and forced to work for nothing, slave labor. So anybody that thought that slavery is gone, it's not gone. It's alive and well in China. And the world has a moral obligation to stand up to this and to stop participating in the exploitation of these peoples, so that at the end of the day, we can all have cheap products. Is that fair enough? I mean, we became so dependent on China for our manufacturing. So much of it would have been carried out by people who were persecuted. We need to make some serious changes, and we need to do everything we can to get people into our parliament who are willing to stand up for Australian manufacturing and who are willing to call this out for what it is. All right, so here's an article right here. This is also from the province of East Turkestan, otherwise referred to as the Xinjiang province by the Chinese Communist Party. This is in relation to the Uyghur Muslims once again. Mass rape, sexual abuse. Communist China's genocidal tool to eliminate faith. That's right, genocidal tool, a very, very accurate term here. Regardless of their ages, the CCP is persecuting spiritual believers of all faiths under the disguise of re-educating them. They say, hey, no, it's just a re-education camp. But then we find out, we see the big walls, we see the barbed wire, we see the watchtowers, we see people shackled in chains. Oh no, it's re-education. Says here, since the Chinese Communist Party came to power in 1949, it has been employing unethical ways to persecute citizens and suppress spiritual groups. Recently, several reports have confirmed how the CCP is using sexual abuse as a tool for, quote, re-educating and transforming prisoners of faith, regardless of their age. Rooted in atheism and materialism, the communist regime has been brutally suppressing Uyghur Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and Falun Gong practitioners for years. Those who refuse to comply with the CCP's orders are detained and taken to secretive re-education camps where they are subjected to unimaginable abuses, including gang rape and electrocution. Okay, so this is a very common practice in China. This is what they do to people who have alternative views that fall outside of the ideological views of the Chinese Communist Party. They're beaten, they're tortured, they're forced to renounce their views. And then, of course, we see the horrible sexual assault campaign, and this is just one of many. Now, these are the thugs and criminals that Daniel Andrews has gotten Victoria into bed with on such a deep level. That's right. Since the inception of Daniel Andrews' tenure as Premier, he's wasted no time developing deepened ties with the Chinese Communist Party. He's never called them out for these abuses, by the way. He's never called them out specifically. You know, he may say, well, we don't see everything eye to eye, but when challenged on the persecution of minorities in China, Daniel Andrews is silent. Now, he's basically inviting these types of people into our backyard. There's a word for that, and that word is treason. So this is one of the concentration camps here. Does that look like a re-education camp to you? Barbed wire fence, watchtower, big walls? No, that's a prison. Okay, and a lot of the stories are really heartbreaking. So just further in the article, it goes through some eyewitness testimonies of certain women who were beaten and electrocuted and raped by multiple men whilst inside of these concentration camps. It's utterly heartbreaking, and I'll post it in my Telegram so you can read about it, because everybody should be made aware of the terrible crimes against humanity being carried out by the Chinese Communist Party. And if you think those crimes can't happen in Australia, you're crazy. If it can happen in China, it can happen here. Guess what? Started in China, it's happening in Hong Kong. The cultural outlook of the Chinese Communist Party is slowly being spread all around the world, actually not so slowly. And the greater degree to which we intertwine with this regime, the greater degree we open ourselves up to the same type of treatment that many of the Chinese people are subjected to on a routine basis. One of the victims here said, quote, "Rape has become a culture. It is gang rape, and the Chinese police not only rape them, but also electrocute them. They are subject to horrific torture." Yeah, it's absolutely horrible. There's some artwork there of a woman being beaten, and it's absolutely disgusting. And this is, you know, we should never have supported this. We sold out here in Australia. You know, China entered the World Trade Organization. In the Western world, USA, Australia, Europe, we saw opportunities to export our manufacturing and to make really cheap goods. We sold our manufacturing and we turned the other way in the face of terrible injustice. And in doing so, we've created the biggest monster the world has ever seen. So, yeah, I wanted to just put that in perspective. All right, moving on here. This is pretty interesting. A Xinjiang firm, so this is a Chinese company located in the region we're just talking about, which is home to the Muslim minorities, seek damages from foreign researcher over forced labor reports. That's right. So a Chinese company is actually looking to sue an American research organization over claims of human rights abuses that are beyond any doubt whatsoever being carried out in the Xinjiang region. And this just really goes to show how much nerve the Chinese Communist Party has. We have an avalanche of evidence. We know this is going on. Countless amounts of eyewitness testimonies, leaked footage, satellite footage, you know, actual confessions from Chinese officials, surgeons that have been involved in human organ harvesting. Yet this Chinese corporation thinks they can sue researchers for reporting on it. I'm going to read to you here. The official news outlet of the Chinese Communist Party, Xinjiang region, said unidentified companies from the area have filed a domestic civil lawsuit seeking unspecified compensation from a US-based human rights researcher whose reports alleged forced labor is used in the region's cotton industry. The company said researcher Adrian Zen's reports were untrue and damaged the reputation of the industry and led to economic losses after the United States banned cotton imports from Xinjiang, according to a report on the Xinjiang Communist Party website on Monday evening. It says here, quote, "The administration of former US President Donald Trump in December banned imports of cotton from Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, which produces around 30% of China's cotton. In January, it announced an import ban on all cotton and tomato products from Xinjiang over allegations that they were made with forced labor without citing the source of the allegations." All right, so it's been filed in China. So, you know, filing a lawsuit like this in a Chinese court holds zero bearing over anything that transpires in the United States. But it's just an interesting insight. It's an interesting insight into the mentality of the Chinese Communist Party, which demonstrates time and time again they will act in a very sociopathic fashion. Whatever we're guilty of, we'll accuse you of. You know, the Chinese Communist Party, of course, made decisions to halt many of our exports. whether it was barley, beef, dairy, etc., and then accused Australia of breaking the rules. So just moving forward here, these cases of systemic sexual abuse in the Xinjiang province in China. This is not like I'm talking about some sort of like isolated region where this type of abuse is taking place. This is from Breitbart here. China raping Tibetan women in separate crop of concentration camps. So of course, the people of Tibet, another region in China who have fiercely been fighting for their independence for a very long time, have suffered very similar treatment to the Muslim women living in East Turkestan. So I'm going to read to you a little bit here. Women detained in Chinese government-run camps in Tibet are routinely raped by their guards, Bitter Winter, an online human rights magazine, alleged on Thursday. Says here, quote, just like Muslim women in Xinjiang, lay Buddhist girls and nuns are also submitted to systemic rape in Tibet's transformation through education camps. It says here there is a political reason for this. Once raped, a nun will I think this is a bit of a typo. Once raped, a nun will be more difficult to be taken back by her monastery and should settle for a secular life. Okay, I think that may have been not written the best way. So yeah, in other words, you torture someone and they'll be more reluctant to resist, right? You intimidate someone, you scare someone, you torture someone, somebody gets brutalized, of course they're going to be discouraged from standing up for their cause. China allegedly forced over 500,000 Tibetans into military-style camps designed to train rural surplus laborers into industrial workers in the first half of 2020. All right, so yet again, more systemic abuse from the Chinese Communist Party. And similar for the practitioners of Falun Gong. That's right, the Falun Gong movement in China, which is a spiritual movement based on ancient Chinese teachings, movements, physical exercise, stretching, and focusing on various traditional Chinese philosophies. The Chinese Communist Party does not like the Falun Gong movement simply because it became so popular once that it potentially threatened the stability of the stranglehold of which the Chinese Communist Party had on Chinese society. So again, these people have been subjected to the same type of treatment. Sexual torture of detained Falun Gong Duffer adherents rampant. Virtually all Falun Gong Duffer prisoners of conscience in China, both male and female, are subjected to sexual torture. All right, so I'm going to post this as well in my Telegram. You can read it for yourself. All the sources are here within the article. And I really just wanted to help expose some of these tremendous and disgusting crimes against humanity being carried out in China, and to emphasize once again that China's rise was only made possible and the Chinese Communist Party is only as powerful as it is due to we in the West selling out our manufacturing, and we in Australia providing them with all the steel and fossil fuels that they needed to power this expansionist, abusive regime. All right, moving on to international trade. China ratifies world's largest free trade agreement. That's right, the world's largest free trade agreement, and Australia is a signatory. I'm going to read to you here. China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao has announced that the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership had been ratified during the National People's Congress in Beijing 3 months ahead of schedule. So they're very eager, China. They're very eager to get on board with this multilateral free trade agreement, a massive free trade agreement. We've never seen anything like it. The 15-member trade deal was inked in mid-November. It is the world's largest free trade agreement and includes the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, plus China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. The RCEP agreement will enter into force 60 days after 6 ASEAN member states and 3 non-ASEAN member states have ratified the deal. We have not ratified it as of yet, but reports indicate Australia will be soon to follow China's lead. Okay, so this is a massive trade agreement right here. India was initially meant to be part of this trade agreement, but actually backed out due to security concerns and due to concerns that the deal would be so heavily tilted in favor of China that by engaging in this massive multilateral trade agreement, we could actually be further fueling China's rise and further fueling China's expansionist tendencies in other countries. And that's not even taking into consideration the stranglehold to which China has over its own citizens, as we just spoke about. So this is from last year. This is from the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. Australia signs world's largest free trade agreement. This is in relation to the multilateral agreement we're just talking about. This is from late last year, 26th of November. Australia has signed up to the landmark Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Trade Agreement. It claims that we're going to have better access to 30% of the global economy. And here are the benefits as reported by the Australian government, benefits of which need to be scrutinised to the highest degree, because you've got to understand that when we're talking about free trade, and I'll never say that free trade is a bad thing. You can't. It's not a black and white topic where you can say unequivocally free trade is good or free trade is bad. It depends on who you're trading with. It depends on what industries you're dealing in. So I'm going to read to you the proposed benefits right here. It says when it comes into force, likely 2021, so could be any time, right? The agreement will deliver multiple benefits for Australian exporters. These include a new single set of rules and procedures for accessing preferential tariffs. Okay, so a single set of rules. The first question I have is, how will the arbitration work? Is there going to be some type of panel? Could Australia be entering a position whereby we could potentially be sued as a nation for millions upon millions of dollars in some type of unofficial kangaroo court where China is leading the courtroom? That's the first question I have in regards to this trade deal. So how will the new set of rules be enforced? Liberalise trade in services, improve mechanisms for tackling non-tariff barriers in customs procedures, quarantine and technical standards. Okay, so barriers, I mean, we have pretty strict quarantine barriers for, say, importing things like seafood from overseas or meats or any type of bio product. I think that we would all like to see that those barriers are kept in place, right? We don't want to be bringing in potentially contaminated food and so forth. So it's a huge agreement, and I'm going to have to go through it and really read through it in a lot more detail and consult with some experts that I have in my network about it to get back to you and give a much more detailed report. So this trade deal alone, I think, is going to require like a 2-hour report, not just from me, but also with experts that I'm in touch with in the field. It says here also new rules on e-commerce to make it easier for businesses to trade online. I wonder what those new rules would be. I made a whole presentation on e-commerce and how Chinese-based businesses are so easily able to pose as Australian businesses for the purpose of deceiving Australian consumers into thinking that A, their businesses are based in Australia, which often they're not, and B, the product is being sent from within Australia, which often it's not, often it's sent by China. And by exploiting these loopholes, Chinese businesses are able to avoid paying GST, they're able to get massive discounts on customs duties, and they're able to access various discounts on shipping via a subsidiary of the United Nations called the Universal Postal Union. That's right. So you, the Australian consumer, actually subsidises China's shipping costs for small items that are mostly sold via e-commerce platforms such as eBay, shops on, from Shopify. I was about to say Shopify, Amazon, etc. So I'd like to know what these new rules on e-commerce are. Scott Morrison thought that he was handling it a few years ago when he tried to crack down on offshore e-commerce platforms avoiding GST, but that was a huge failure because it was just so easy. It was just so easy for there to be a workaround. What these Chinese companies did was, instead of sending goods from a company name, they just sent it under the name of a private individual. That's all they did. Simple as that. No more GST. I mean, the loopholes are so easy. Our economy has been exploited for so long, and the reason it's been exploited is that politicians have not taken the time and effort to understand the cracks in the system. I mean, I can give you a very, very detailed report on e-commerce alone and how year in, year out, we are losing millions of dollars. Australian businesses are being undercut to these predatory fake businesses posing as Australian businesses. It's absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent here because I'm kind of reading this here and I'm saying, well, new rules needed to be implemented, 20 years ago. It says a common set of rules on intellectual property. Oh, okay, so we're going to trust China to respect international intellectual property because they've done so in the past. The greatest indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So setting a common set of rules on intellectual property We already have rules on intellectual property, global rules on intellectual property, and China has never respected them. China built their economy off, yes, us giving up our manufacturing, and yes, us supplying China with coal and iron ore. But primarily their economy was built on stolen intellectual property, partly because we were so stupid to allow them to steal it from us. But it still goes to show China's lack of regard for patents, etc. And it also says here, agreed rules of origin to help suppliers contribute to regional production chains. Australia will work towards ratification of the agreement in 2021. So yeah, we're going to go through this more, and we're going to really get our teeth stuck. We're going to really sink our teeth in and try and work out exactly what that means for Australia. So they're looking to reduce something like 90% of tariffs for the countries that are involved. So will this set the framework for Australia to be even further flooded with cheap crap from overseas? Will this trade agreement potentially undermine Australian exporters instead of empowering them? Of course, the government, seems very confident that this is all great. I mean, look at CHAFTA, the Chinese-Australia Free Trade Agreement. Did that really help Australia in the long run? Maybe in the short term. But what it did was it opened the floodgates to so-called Chinese investment. Whether it was taking over assets here, mining rights, farms, buildings, real estate, companies, organizations. And we also saw a very lazy Foreign Investment Review Board after the implementation of CHAFTA, which essentially never knocked anything back. Chinese Communist Party wants to buy up a huge amount of farmland, a port, an airstrip. Foreign Investment Review Board ticked it all off. And Scott Morrison was the former treasurer and had the opportunity to block a lot of strategic takeovers by China, and he didn't. And we need to pull him up on that. So yeah, there's a lot more to go into, obviously, and we will get to that on another episode. All right, so moving on here, guys. So Reignite Democracy Australia, of course, we are coming. That's right. We're more than people that speak online. We're taking action. The objective of our movement, and ultimately what we want, is to play a role in propping up good, decent people who want to run as candidates, who want to represent the people of Australia, and seeking to have the career politicians voted out. So if you'd like to play a role in this, and I know many of you do, you can jump on to reignitedemocracyaustralia.com, put your details in, and you can actually play a role in taking our country back. And of course, we have the MCJ Report. That's right. So you can jump onto my website, pop your email address in, and make sure that you stay up to date with everything that's going on. Also, if you'd like to support the show, I've put this little widget on my website. So that's www.mcjreport.com/support. Just to let you guys know, I've been self-funded up until this point. So I've been working on this mission for quite a few years now, since 2019 when I first got involved protesting Daniel Andrews, and I really haven't taken a step back. And some people speculate and they say, well, Morgan works for Reignite Democracy. That's not true. I don't get paid from Reignite Democracy. Of course, Monica and I, we work on shared objectives, but I don't work for RDA. There's been some other little theories floating around online that supposedly I'm paid for by some type of billionaire or someone like that. That's not true either. I can look you in the eyes. I can tell you that I'm self-funded, but the time has come that I will actually be requiring support. So if you would like to support it, of course, it's completely optional. My content will always be free. You can support for as little as $5 a month at mcjreport.com/support. So yeah, I'd like to really thank everyone for tuning in today, and I'm going to chop this presentation up, upload it in segments, and we'll be back another day. So I'm going to revisit the Australian Bureau of Statistics in order to go a little bit more in depth into their methodology behind attributing deaths to COVID. And we're going to take a closer look at this multilateral free trade agreement, which I'm actually feeling quite nervous about. So I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Lots of love to each and every one of you, and I'll catch you on the next show. Thank you. And also, I'm going to replay this at 9:30. I know that the connection was not that good and that a lot of you were struggling before. So I'm going to re-upload it, play it again at 9:30, and it should be smooth next time round. Lots of love. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.